everyone. My name is Megan Rowe. I am the manager at St. Jude Wellness Center. I'm also a registered dietitian. Usually I teach to you from my office, but I'm actually over at the hospital today. We had some meetings, so I am blurring my background because I'm kind of in just an ugly conference room off in the corner. Today's topic is tracking your health. And early baby watch, yay. I'm sorry, I got distracted by comments over in the comment section. Feel free to put comments and questions in the chat. Since I do have you all muted, I will get to them as I can. It's hard for me to see them when I'm in presentation mode, so know that there will be plenty of time. Today will be actually a shorter class than usual. It'll definitely be more like a lunch and learn quickie, probably no more than 30 minutes, just because I'm trying to play with shorter class times. I've been getting that feedback from those of you who are at work watching these. I'm not always going to be able to do that because some of our topics are very big, but today I think will be a shorter, on the shorter side topic. So let me pull up my slides so that I can quit gabbing and we can get learning. Okay. Excellent. Okie dokie. Here we go. So it is Heart Health Month in the month of February. And in Heart Health Month, most people are talking about fats and maybe explaining heart disease, low-fat diet, fiber, and we've done those. And if you're interested in those topics, you can go to stjudewellnesscenter.org and go see some of the past topics. But I thought I might do something a little bit different this Heart Health Month and talk about what are things that you can track to make sure that you're on track for heart health and for general health. So today is not just about heart health, but we will be talking about a lot of things that you can track on your own instead of every year waiting for your lab results to come in with your cholesterol numbers. I feel like that's usually what we wait for when we could be tracking things all year long to see if we're on track with how we're eating, how we're moving, things like that. So I'm going to go basically just over my favorite trackable data that you can get on your own, how to track it, why those pieces of trackable data are important, and that'll be today's agenda. So just a quickie in that I'm wondering if you own trackers, those of you in this class. You can put it in the chat or just think to yourself, do you have one or more? Because I know so many people, not just my clients, my coworkers, my friends, who have at least one, if not two. They have an Apple Watch and an Oura Ring. They have all kinds of things, and it is a huge, huge market. The wearable, trackable health devices is huge. There's so much money involved. We're talking billions of dollars. And I think it can one, be very overwhelming and okay, well now what do I do with this thing that's telling me all this information? But also two, which one is the best one? Because they're pricey, they're not cheap. And then, are you going to actually use that data because you're wearing this Apple Watch and it's giving you all these numbers? What do I do with that? So that's kind of the point of today. First and foremost, my first favorite, ultimate, best thing ever that you can track is steps per day. And I know this is so old school and it seems so cliche, like, come on, Megan, steps per day, really? Steps per day really is significantly linked to mortality risk, heart health, metabolic health, cognition. I couldn't even link all of the studies that show just how important steps per day is. And it's not so much that magical number of steps. It's more that in stepping, you're not sitting. And sitting is the kicker. Sitting is what is leading to mortality and morbidity and various types of metabolic conditions because we're just sitting there. So it's really important that we are taking steps. And there was a really cool study that showed those who took at least 8,000 steps per day had 50% lower risk of death from heart disease than those taking just 4,000 steps per day. So there is a big difference between 4,000 and 8,000. The real true guideline for optimal health is at least 10,000. So, you start where you are. And that's what's so cool about tracking is you can track your steps for a week. What's your average daily step count? Is it 4,000? Then next week, can you get an average daily step count of 4,500? That's doable. It just means you have to like get up and go fill up your water bottle a couple more times or walk to the further bathroom a couple more times. Can you then get it to 5,000 to 6,000? Can you get yourself up to 8 to 10,000 steps per day? And if you're increasing 500 steps per week, I mean, you'll be there before you know it, and it won't seem quite as tricky, but that's a really significant difference in your risk of death from heart disease in just getting up and moving. So again, that minimum is 8,000 steps per day. The optimal is 10,000 steps plus. The other thing that I didn't write on here that is really interesting in the research is that it's more important that you get those 10,000 steps throughout the day and not all at once. So we have a lot of gym rats, right? And I mean, I technically probably fall in this category too, in that we get all of our steps. We see 10,000 on there. We went to the gym, we did our circuit training, and then we sit all day long at a computer. And we don't have any steps the rest of the day. And what research has actually shown is that is more risky in some ways for your health than taking less steps, but having them spurred throughout the day. So 10,000 obviously in one chunk is better than nothing at all. So definitely don't think that, well, if I can only get one exercise in per day, then I'm not going to do it at all. But do see if, okay, maybe if I can get some small snippets of time throughout the day, technically my total number of steps goes down a little bit, but I'm moving all throughout the day instead of just sitting. That's actually really critical too. And it doesn't have to be large chunks. So maybe you get up and you take 500 steps. Maybe you get up and you take 300 steps. What seems to be the golden rule in the research is a minimum of 250 steps per time that you're moving. So if you can get up every hour, every 2 hours even, and take at least 250 steps, that's basically going to the bathroom and coming back. Take at least 250 steps before you sit back down. This could also count as maybe getting up and doing 10 to 20 squats. If you do them like air squats where you're doing kind of a heel raise or a tiny little jump in between, those will count as steps as well. If you do that throughout the day and have an exercise, a 30-minute walk, 2 15-minute walks, you'll definitely hit 10,000 and you will have reduced that cardiovascular risk by doing your steps all throughout the day. So I can't say enough about tracking your steps. It's so easy to do. There are lots of different trackers since this was kind of the OG trackable data point for those of us who are interested in tracking our data. There's a Fitbit, that's just the original, and Fitbit's pretty, I mean, they've gotten actually kind of sophisticated, but the original Fitbit is literally just steps. Apple Watch tracks your steps. The Garmin tracks your steps. Your Oura Ring will actually track your steps. Pedometers, you could just get a really old school clip-on pedometer, and it might not be super accurate, but you'll at least be getting an idea of what your baseline is. There's also calculators out there that, I mean, they do a calculation based on your average steps per mile. And so if you know how many miles you walked, like if you're someone who kind of knows your neighborhood walk and, oh, I walked for 3 miles, you can kind of calculate it that way. I guess if you have no device available to you, it's again, a kind of an okay baseline, but it's not going to be really that accurate for you. And I don't find it that motivating either. Like sometimes when you have your watch on you and you can see, oh gosh, I'm only at 5,000 and it's 4 o'clock at night. That's more motivating than at the end of the day, typing it into a calculator. So steps per day. Next trackable is your heart rate variability. You may have heard of this as HRV. If you have an Apple Watch or an Oura Ring, then you've definitely heard of this, but you might not know exactly what it means. And to be totally honest, it took me a while to wrap my head around the concept of HRV because it's not how much time between heartbeats. It's the variability of time between heartbeats. So it's kind of like this average over time equation of the time between heartbeats and how different those amounts of time are, because we don't want the same exact amount of seconds in between each heartbeat. That shows rigidity, that shows static heartbeats. It shows that the heart rate and the elasticity of our lining is really kind of rigid. Whereas if we have lots of variability, if there's 15 seconds, 18 seconds, 32 seconds, that just shows that there's a lot of adaptability in our heart and our heart function, our cardiovascular function. So HRV is such an awesome indicator of your cardiovascular health because it shows how adaptable your heart is and your cardiovascular system is to stress. Because if you suddenly have a stressor and there's something in front of you that you have to react to, your heart rate has to be able to bounce around really, really quickly to respond to that. So the more adaptable and variable that time between heart rates is, the better you're able to respond to stressors. So it almost seems backwards, like, don't we want it to be really particular? But no, we don't. We want lots of fluidity and elasticity in our HRV. So the higher number on your HRV is better. Okay, so higher is better when it comes to HRV. Just keep that in mind if that is showing up on whatever trackable you own. Higher HRV is associated with better cardiovascular health overall, is associated with better stress resilience, and is associated with all markers of longevity being better. It's actually also tied significantly to improved performance and attention and emotional processing. So it makes sense that if you are more resilient to stress, you're going to be more emotionally resilient as well, right? You're going to be able to kind of be fluid with your emotions. You're going to be better with your attention because you're not stressing with things in front of you. Chronically low HRV signifies chronic stress. It could signify poor recovery, and it's always correlated with metabolic conditions. So, and this is chronic. If you have like 2 days in a row of low HRV, you might have had a little bug that your body was trying to fight. You might have had a poor night's sleep. We're talking consistently, day after day, week after week, you're always showing up with low HRV. Then we might actually be at a risk of, or might already have something like heart disease, a heart condition of some shape or form, blood pressure issues, hypertension. Those are all correlated with low HRV. So the trouble with HRV is there isn't like a known number that for sure we know is what we're going for. Just like with steps, we know we're going for 8 to 10,000 at a minimum. For blood sugar, which I'm going to talk about in a second, we have a range that we're always looking for. With HRV, it's really what's your baseline? And then how is that changing? So we know the higher, the better. But what we're really looking for is track your HRV for a week to even a month and see what your kind of averages are, and then see what happens to it when certain things go on. So look what happens to it after you exercise, after you eat a high sugar meal versus a high protein meal, after you've had a good night's sleep versus a bad night's sleep, after alcohol, things like that. It can really help you start seeing which of your lifestyle interventions are helping you to improve or not improve your HRV. That's really the key thing about HRV, not so much what is your baseline, but what's making it change and what's making it consistently low versus consistently high, if that makes sense. So in general-ish, we want it to be 50 or above. That's kind of a good goal. If it's below 50 all the time, there might be something going on with, again, your stress resilience, some sort of metabolic condition, a heart condition, where there's not any variability going on at all. But anything over 50 is considered okay. And then again, the higher the better. And we always want to see it improving or kind of more or less the same. A change of more than 5 is considered significant. So if your heart rate, if your HRV was 76, as it says on this phone today, and tomorrow it's 77, and the next day it's 75, that's not considered that much change one way or the other. But if it's 76 today and tomorrow it's 50, or even if it's 65, that's a significant enough change to be like, ooh, what brought my HRV down that much the day before? Different devices where you can track that. The Whoop device is an armband device that's kind of along the lines of a Fitbit plus an Apple Watch. So Whoop does track HRV, Apple Watch tracks HRV, some of the Garmin's track HRV, and then there's actually something called the Elite HRV, which only tracks HRV. You also, things that aren't watches are the Oura Ring and the Kito finger clip. So it actually like clips onto your finger, and you can just track your HRV like that one time. So in the morning, you could see what your HRV is in the morning. The Oura Ring you wear all the time, so you can look at your HRV throughout the day. The downside of Oura Ring is it doesn't track a whole lot more other than your HRV, and now the updated version can also track your steps. The other cool thing about HRV is that it can help you decide what to do for your day. So if you're kind of consistently in the 80s for your HRV and you have a really consistent exercise routine, and then you wake up and you're at 70, you're at 10 points less. Maybe you had a late night out drinking with your friends, you ate a lot of food you don't usually eat, you didn't sleep as well. That might be a really good day to not do a HIIT training session. It might be a better day to do yoga or light walking, something more restorative. If possible, maybe not do intense things at work. But if your numbers are always high, you wake up, it's even higher today, that's probably a good indicator that you can handle more stressful things. You can give a presentation really well. That might be the day where you do a lot of brainstorming, where you do a circuit class at the gym. So it can also help you decide what to do that day so that your body responds best to whatever exercise or stress you are going to put into your life. All right, CBG, continuous blood glucose. These are one of my favorite devices to track because you can track it so closely in real time. So what it is it's a device that you plug in. So you are plugged into it. It's tracking literally your blood 24 hours a day, and it is tracking your glucose. It's tracking your blood sugar. So it's going to show whether you're having spikes or prolonged elevations, and all of that is associated with inflammatory state. When your blood sugars are really high for a significant amount of time, it can also be connected to your inability to lose weight. So kind of like a weight loss plateau. It can be related to your insulin resistance and low energy. So it can be really telling for a lot of different ways. It's not just, oh, my blood sugars are high, I'm worried about diabetes, but if you've not been able to lose weight for a while, if you feel like you're always having cravings, you're always having low energy, this could tell you why. Or especially if you're having those types of symptoms at a certain time of the day, oh my gosh, my blood sugars are running really low because they spiked really high right after lunch. Maybe I can adjust something. Blood sugar spikes are related to hunger cravings, anxiety also, and reduced metabolic flexibility, which means you're not able to use all types of nutrients for energy. You're really only able to use glucose, which is something we don't want. It helps with personalized nutrition and with your wellness strategies, because again, if your blood sugar is spiking after you do a certain type of activity, maybe we need to look at how that activity is functioning for you. So there are some goals for glucose as opposed to HRV. You want to wake up in the morning and have your glucose be 70 to 90. That's a really, really good range, possibly up to 100 for some people who have some insulin resistance. But if you're waking up with a fasting blood sugar over 100, we're probably looking at, we might need to test for diabetes, or there might be some sort of hormonal thing going on, because they really shouldn't be that high after a full night of sleep. You also want your 2 hours after your meal to be less than 120 and or less than a 30-point increase. So maybe you had a slightly higher than normal, blood sugar at around 11, and it was 110, which is more than we want it to be pre-eating. And then you ate your meal and it only went up to 120. Like, okay, that's technically a little bit on the higher side for your baseline, but that meal itself wasn't the issue. It was because it only went up 10 points. It was whatever was going on before that first reading. Maybe you were stressed, maybe you didn't sleep well, maybe you had a really large breakfast, something like that. So we want it to be less than 120 after eating, and or not too high of an increase. We also want it to return back down to wherever it was baseline within 2 hours of eating. So if you eat a meal for breakfast and let's say your fasting was at 90, and you eat a meal for breakfast and whoa, you spiked up to like 120. You're like, oh man, that was a big glucose breakfast. As long as that comes back down to 90 to 100 within 2 hours, that shows you really good insulin sensitivity. So yes, that meal was kind of high in blood sugar and we don't want it to spike that high, but at least your body's taking care of it really quickly. It's getting it out of the blood. Whereas if you shot up to 100 and it stays at 100 or 120, 119-ish for like 2-3 hours, it's just really slow decline. You have insulin resistance for sure because your body's not sucking that glucose into the cells. So this is a really cool tracker for so many reasons because it's helping out with symptom management. It's helping us to make decisions about our meals based on how our own body is responding, because people might respond really differently to a baked potato meal, right? I have a baked potato with chicken and broccoli, and my husband has a baked potato with chicken and broccoli. We're going to respond differently. So we should make our own decisions about how we eat and our portions based on how our own blood sugar is working. So it's really, really personalized. That's why I like this so much. There's a couple different types of CGMs. There's a brand called Levels where anyone can purchase it. You don't have to have diabetes. They typically affiliate with the Dexcom brand, and Dexcom is also available to you with a prescription, as well as Freestyle Libre. NutriSense is available with prescription, but Lingo is a cool new one on the market that I really like. It's from the company called Abbott. And the Lingo is specifically for people without diabetes. So it's for the population of people who are just wanting to track for health reasons, not because they have diabetes already. So you don't have to have a prescription for it, and it's not as expensive because of that. And you can just buy it. It doesn't have to go through a health provider. You can also just take strips. You can go to CVS and buy blood sugar monitor and some strips and test at when you wake up, test and 2 hours after you eat, test right before you eat, test before bed, and see what that looks like. You're not getting that real-time data, which is really cool about the CGM, but it's a lot more affordable. It's not as expensive, and you only have to test yourself a couple times a day. It's still going to give you some good data. Obviously, you can also test your blood. Once or twice a year, you can get an A1C test that will show you your 3-month average of your blood sugar, which is also great. But again, it's not giving you that real-time data of the everyday, which is what the whole point of this topic is, what you can track on your own. And then I have that little asterisk of I highly recommend food journaling if you're going to do blood sugar tracking, because it doesn't really help much if you're seeing something wrong with your blood sugar numbers. If you don't know what you've been eating that made that happen, how are you supposed to make a change to how you were eating or how you were moving? So highly recommend that. And a lot of apps for CGMs have food journaling built in. Okay, this one is for a specific population. Not everyone needs to measure their ketones, but I do work with enough people who kind of dabble with a ketogenic diet that I think it's worth noting that there are ketone strips out there where you can essentially measure the ketones in your urine, but they're not super accurate, because you can have ketones in your urine and it doesn't mean you have ketones in your blood. So if you are someone who is interested in ketosis or in following like a fairly low carb diet, you probably want to invest in a glucose ketone index tracker. The best one out there on the market is this Keto Mojo device. And what it essentially is it's measuring both your ketones and your blood sugar, and it's creating a calculation ratio, because a lot of people who are following a ketogenic diet don't do it right or well, and they end up eating low carb, but they're not eating low carb enough to be in ketosis. And so then they have elevated blood sugar and elevated ketones, and that's dangerous to have both of those. So you might not be getting the most accurate data. So I highly recommend, again, only if this is a track that you're on in keto and very low carb, to get a Keto Mojo device and find out your GKI, your glucose ketone index. You're looking for a number of either 1 to 3 for deep ketosis, or 3 to 6 for those who are maybe looking for kind of more moderate ketosis. You can also get blood sugar monitors and ketone strips at the same time and do that yourself. So not for everyone, but I find it valuable for if this is a track that you're on. Okay, blood pressure is such an easy one and so often forgotten. I feel like it is so easy to track. You just need a cuff of some kind, but it's really important because elevated blood pressure and hypertension is known as the silent killer, because we often don't feel the symptoms unless we're really in tune with our bodies. And it is significantly linked to cardiovascular events and mortality. So it's just a really simple thing to track when you wake up, before you do exercise, maybe after you've had a big meal, just to kind of see what your averages are and what your body is getting elevated blood pressure from. You know, are you just having elevated blood pressure when you have something really stressful happen? Well, that's fairly normal, but is it happening consistently throughout the day? After you wake up in the morning, things like that, that we might want to track. It's a really just good tool to prevent heart conditions early on, especially if you're someone who has a heart risk already. So if you already had a heart attack, or maybe you have elevated LDLs and cholesterol, tracking your blood pressure a couple times a day, or especially before and after exercise, can help prevent a heart event from happening. Okay. So your goal is around 120/80, and then just to know your baseline. So some people run higher or lower than that, just always. I tend to be a low blood pressure person, so I kind of know my baseline is a little bit lower than that just regularly. And so if it's dropping too much lower, too much higher, that's where I'm concerned. So your Apple Watch and your Whoop will both track these for you, so you don't need to get a cuff. But there's also different types of devices like the Omron BP monitor. There's something called the Cardio Arm. There's a Withings BPM Connect. These are all just different types of devices that will also track your blood pressure. And you can also just get an old-fashioned cuff. Go to the pharmacy, buy a cuff. They're not that hard to use, so you don't need something fancy to track your blood pressure. Resting heart rate is another one I feel like that is often forgotten because we get all wrapped up in these cool devices in our watches that track all these neat data points. Resting heart rate is super crucial for your cardiovascular health and your metabolic health. All it is the measure of heartbeats per minute at rest is the key. So if you're measuring your heart rate, right after you went for a walk, that can help you see how high it went after the walk, but that's not your resting heart rate. Your resting heart rate is your baseline, your day-to-day at rest. This is how quickly or not quickly it's beating. And this is the opposite of HRV, where the lower is actually better. We want our heart rate to be nice and relaxed. We like a really relaxed heart rate. So that always indicates a better cardiovascular efficiency and is correlated with better longevity and markers overall. Consistently elevated resting heart rate indicates elevated stress response, overtraining, poor heart health, or metabolic conditions, even like diabetes. Resting heart rate of 80 has almost 3 times higher risk of diabetes than a resting heart rate of 60, which I find really interesting because the Heart Health Association, the American Heart Health Association, recommends a range of 60 to 100 for resting heart rate, always saying that the lower of that end is better. So 80, going back to that data point right above it, 80 is within normal according to that range. But just 20 points higher than 60 is still at almost 3 times higher risk of diabetes. So it shows you just how crucial the lower resting heart rate is. And imagine if you were over 100, what that risk of mortality, of metabolic conditions, of heart disease would be. So we really want to keep that to the lower side of things. And it's really easy to track if you're just find your pulse, put on a timer for 60 seconds, make sure you're rested, your feet are on the ground and not crossed, and you just count. That's it. That's all you have to do. But you can also find your resting heart rate on your Apple Watch, your Fitbit, Whoop, Garmin, chest bands, and pulse oximeters. All of these are great trackable devices. And then body composition is something I love, and we have an InBody here at the Wellness Center. I think it's so cool to know what your body is made of instead of just how much you weigh. Because who cares how much you weigh? How much of that is muscle? How much of that is lean mass? How much of that is fat? What type of fat is it? So it's important because of the types of data it gives you. One of the things you can find from body composition scales is how much muscle you have. And our muscle is our primary metabolic organ. It is our number one organ that helps with metabolic function, the function of our mitochondria in our cells so that we can produce energy really well. And our muscle predicts our longevity. It's super crucial. So if we're just standing on a scale and getting our weight, I have no idea of knowing if I'm gaining muscle or gaining fat. The body composition scales will also show you the levels of visceral fat you have. So again, how much fat I have maybe isn't necessarily as important as my visceral fat, which is the sticky fat that surrounds our organs. It's kind of like the beer belly fat. That type of fat is significantly correlated with chronic disease, with metabolic disease, with mortality in general. So that's another key thing to look at, especially if you're someone who's maybe trying to lose weight. We want to make sure we're losing the right type of weight. We're not losing muscle and holding on to our visceral fat. And then it'll also show you something called body fat percentage, which is the percentage of your total weight that is fat. And the higher those percentages are, the higher your risk of all-cause mortality. So some of your trackable goals, and these body composition machines give you a lot of data. If you've ever had an InBody or one of the home devices, it gives you a big amount of data. I think the most important are these 4. how much muscle mass you have. And there isn't a target range here. This is really unique to the person. You just want to make sure you're within what's healthy range for your gender and your age. Lean body mass is a good indicator of health. For women, we want that to be 27 to 31%. For men, 32 to 40%. Body fat should be 20 to 30% for women, 10 to 20% for men. And our visceral score, that visceral fat number, should be under 10. It's a calculation, so we always want that 10 or below. And things that you can track it. You can get on an in-body machine. A lot of gyms have these now, including us at the Wellness Center. But there's also home versions of these. There's one called the Fit Track, and there's the Withings Body Scale. So you can purchase them at home. The downside with the home ones, they're more affordable than an in-body, and they're obviously convenient because it's in your home, but you do need to make sure you calibrate them fairly often. Otherwise, your data scores can be all messed up. The other thing with any body composition machine is you want to make sure you're consistent with when you're measuring. So if you're measuring in the morning and then the next day you measure after your workout, and the next day it's the end of the day after you've had a big glass of water, you're going to get measures all over the place. So it is important to be consistent as far as what time of day and what you've just eaten and when you've exercised. You can also, the most accurate is a DEXA scan, and you can do these in water or on an on-land kind of big DEXA machine, but you're looking at more like labs or really high-end gyms that are going to be able to offer that, and usually they're very expensive. So finally, that brings us to lab trackable. So those were all my favorite things to track that you can do on your own. You can either purchase a device, you can go to a gym that has an in-body, you can track all these things in real time every day to see, am I on track or not, so that you're not as surprised at your annual labs with your physician. But these are the things that I think are most important for you to look at when you do get those blood labs. One is your A1C, that's your 3-month average glucose, and that will show you over time what your average glucose is rather than just that one-time prick. And you want that to be 5 to 5.4%. Okay. And really, as you get closer to that 5.4%, we're getting into pre-diabetes range. Fasting insulin. So not your glucose necessarily, but what is your insulin response going on? You want that to be in the 2 to 5 range. Higher than that, we probably have insulin resistance going on. Which is interesting because your A1C might be okay, but if your fasting insulin is high, it means that your insulin is constantly having to work and shunt that glucose into the cells. And right now it's working okay because your A1C is okay. But if a high fasting insulin, even with an okay A1C, shows that over time you have insulin resistance going on, and that can still lead to diabetes. Triglycerides is really important because it's a fat and a sugar molecule connected together. So it shows you cardiovascular health, but also metabolic. It shows your glucose and your sugar intake. That should be less than 80, ideally. A lot of labs will tell you that it just needs to be less than 100, which is okay, but optimal is truly less than 80. HDL is your healthy fat cell. We want that to be 50 to 90 range. Your LDL is your less than healthy cell, fat cell, and that should be less than 100. CRP is a marker of inflammation. We want that to be less than 0.3. And vitamin D is an interesting one to look at because people are like, wait a minute, we just switched from these lab values to a nutrient, but vitamin D is so crucial to our overall health, longevity, metabolic health, that and most Americans are low and or are very close to being low. So we want that to be 50 to 60, even though a lot of lab values will show you that like 40 is okay. We really want that more in the 50 to 60 range so that when you get sick or injured, you have more on board to use. So here are my final thoughts for you is if you're kind of feeling overwhelmed, you're like, I'm interested in tracking things, but I don't really know what to track exactly. Start with your movements per day. Track your minutes of steps per day, or just track your minutes of movement. How much time are you spending walking? You don't want to buy a trackable. You're not ready for a Fitbit. Just how often are you getting up throughout the day to move? Don't even worry about the steps. Just think of your time per day moving and not sitting. Okay. Then we can start to look at tracking your steps, aiming for 8 to 10,000. Blood pressure and resting heart rate are really easy to track because you don't need necessarily a device. You just need a cuff and or your fingers to do your resting heart rate. Okay, so those are easy ones, and just track them maybe when you wake up and pre and post movement, pre and post exercise. Easy, just to get started, get to know your baseline. And if you're feeling overwhelmed, an in-body can be nice. Even though it's a lot of data, it's someone else interpreting the data for you, and all you have to do is stand on a scale. And every 2 to 3 months is a good measurement to see in-body change. Okay, that's your body composition. If you're at the next step, you're like, okay, I'm ready to dabble in some more data. I don't know that I need to like be a biohacker yet. Start food journaling. Start food journaling while wearing a Fitbit or an Apple Watch, and start collecting just 1 to 3 data points. Don't worry about all the things your Apple Watch tells you. Pick the 1 to 3 to watch this month. You could go out and buy glucose strips and test your blood sugar. Again, you could get an in-body. And if you're really ready for some data, you're like, okay, I'm convinced. Let's do this thing. Buy an Apple Watch, buy an Aura ring, or buy a Whoop. All 3 of these are going to give you really cool data that you can make a change today and see a change today. Okay, so the Aura ring, again, is more of that HRV. It's more like your stress resilience marker, versus your Whoop and your Apple Watch are giving you kind of all the data. So it depends on what your goals are. And then if you're like, let's biohack, I'm ready to make all the changes and see what happens after I make these changes, then again, you want the Whoop, the CGM. Okay, that's the one where you're plugging in. CGM, I think, honestly, you could wear even earlier if you're wanting to dabble, but it does mean you're actually plugging something into your arm and dedicating being plugged in for, I think it's 8 days is a round. So it's a commitment. Or the Keto Mojo, or go get a DEXA scan somewhere. So those are kind of your levels. If you're wondering, okay, so which one of all of these, my favorites are the Apple Watch and the Whoop. And I would probably go with the Whoop, only because I don't like to be connected to my phone via my watch. They both give mostly the same data, but the Whoop seems to be more accurate for the HRV. So it gives you some better stress resilience data, in addition to the steps and the heart rate and the blood pressure and all that. And it's not connected to your phone, which I personally like, because I don't need to be any more connected to my phone than I am. So that and the CGM are kind of like my favorite things, but it is a lot of data. It is some financial investment. So with that, I will answer your questions. But before I do, I just want to remind you that we have 2 webinars next month in March. On the 20th, we have personalized meal prep webinar. And on the 26th, we have a virtual cooking class, because March is National Nutrition Month. Yay, dietitians. So we'll be focusing more on the food next month, and both of those are free. So let me pull up the chat. Are we going to get a copy of the recordings? Yes. So always, whenever I do a webinar, the recordings and the slides get sent out within 24 hours to everyone registered. If you did not register, if you just got the link directly, because some of you get that, put your email into the chat for me and I'll make sure you get those. I also post all of our recordings on our website under the video tab. If you can't get steps due to pain, can water movement be exchanged? Yes, absolutely. I do not know of a wearable that truly converts water movement to steps. So that's where you're going to want to look at your time of movement per day. So if you're exercising in the water for 30 minutes, there's 30 minutes of your day, 30 minutes a day, 6 to 7 days a week is considered baseline movement guidelines that are really, really good. So yes, it's just that it's hard to make that equal steps. And making sure you're actually truly moving in the water and not just like floating around. But yeah, water movement absolutely is movement. And can medication affect HRV? Yeah, it definitely can. The ones I know of for sure are going to be like your blood pressure medications and statins. Those will impact HRV. Super significantly, no. Anything that's going to create a bit of an inflammatory response will impact HRV directly, will bring it down. So again, your statins bring their own level of inflammation in a different way. So those are going to bring down your HRV a little bit. And then everyone's going to respond differently too to different medications. So depending on how that medication is impacting your resting heart rate, your breath rate, your sleep ability, and your cortisol, all of those things are going to impact HRV. And so it may be that if you're on a consistent medication forever, it may be that you just need to find a new baseline for your HRV. can I go to the wellness center and use the InBody machine? Absolutely, you can. If you are a member and of like medical fitness member, then you can get those as part of just like a monthly visit. And anytime you come to open gym once a month, if you just want to pop in, you don't really do anything else with us, then it is an appointment based. And it's 15 minutes, $15. You hop on the machine. We give you a really general overview and you walk out. If you want a full comprehensive overview of the InBody result, like I've never seen this before, I want someone to walk through it with me, you'd want to book a health coaching appointment. And then you hop on the InBody, we pull it out, we actually go through all the data with you. So depending on how you interact with our wellness center, you can use the InBody in a variety of different ways. So if you're working with me as a dietitian or with Lynn as our dietitian, we usually do them just as part of the appointment. And then some of our people like to just come in, once a month to do a quick 15-minute just to see if they're on track. So yes. What would you suggest to those who are into taking creatine, and when is the best time to take it? Good question. Not super related to trackables, but I like creatine. Just long story short, I like creatine a lot as a supplement. It's a great longevity, muscle, energy supplement. I've not seen any data on a best time to take it at all. The benefits come no matter what. So I've not seen a best practice. I take mine in the morning. Okay. Thank you. I'm just seeing some emails. Good. Where can we purchase an Oura Ring and an HRV monitor? Oura Ring that's just Google Oura. It's its own company, the Oura Ring. That's what they sell. So you can buy it directly from them. I have no affiliation with any of these, by the way. They're just ones that I've tried. And so that is the HRV monitor, is the Oura Ring. But also the Whoop, WHOOP, you can buy a Whoop device from Whoop. And they also track HRV as well. Do I talk with my doctor to interpret info from the Apple Watch? You can. Depends on who your doctor is and how much time you have in that appointment and how much they're going to delve into data from your Apple Watch. I know doctors, they typically don't have a whole lot of time, but if it's directly related to why you're there, you're having trouble sleeping or you think it's related to a medication, something like that, you certainly can bring your data to your physician if it's related to what that appointment is for. Can you just call your doctor and say, hey, I want to make an appointment to go through my Apple Watch data? I don't know if they'll be willing to do that. That's kind of what wellness centers are for and health coaches. But yeah, if it's pertinent to a health condition, absolutely you can. Before or after a workout and time of day? Hold on, I'm trying to remember what that follow-up question was for. I'm thinking that's the creatine question. Yeah, so creatine, is it best to take it before or after a workout and time of day? Again, there's no best practice on time of day at all. I also have not seen best practice for before or after a workout, because what creatine does is it allows your cells to produce energy more efficiently. So if you take it before a workout, theoretically, it gives you more energy during that workout. But if you take it after the workout, it helps your cells to generate energy to restore and renew the muscle. So everything I've seen on creatine is just take it daily, and it works. It works for a while. It's not like the creatine supplement only works for an hour. So it's not like an acute pre-workout type of supplement. It's a 24-hour supplement. Okay. I think we made it through our questions. So thank you. Yeah, we're there. Awesome. Well, I will get this recording and slides out to you hopefully end of day, if not tomorrow. And for those of you in my anti-inflammatory series, I will see you on Thursday. And for everyone else, I will see you in March for National Nutrition Month and our fun upcoming topics on that. In the meantime, happy tracking, and I will see you all next time. You're welcome. You're very welcome. Bye, everyone. Have a great day.